I, Margaret, was racing to catch the last bus of the night, my heart pounding with the urgency of the moment. The streets were cold and bleak, every shadow seemed to stretch and twist into something threatening. Just as I was about to reach the bus stop, I spotted a little boy standing alone in the darkness. His tiny figure looked so vulnerable against the vast night sky. My heart skipped a beat, not from the rush of time, but from the unexpected encounter with this small, lost soul. I had been trying so hard to get home, but now, the urgency of my task was overshadowed by my concern for him. "Are you all right? What's your name? Are you lost?" I asked, kneeling to meet his gaze. His eyes, wide and scared, were like a reflection of my own fears. "My name is Owen," the boy said, his voice trembling. "I don't remember how to get home." I took a deep breath, forcing a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'll help you find your way home. Owen, we'll get you back to your family soon." I extended my hand, and he simply nodded, unable to find the words. I felt a deep, instinctual pull, a motherly instinct I thought I had buried long ago. At that moment, I was determined to do whatever it took to help him. As we walked, Owen would occasionally point in a direction, his guidance more intuitive than precise. I held his hand tightly, feeling an inexplicable connection growing between us. It was a connection fueled by a fierce desire to protect him from the dangers lurking in the night. "It's dangerous for a child to be out here alone," I murmured to myself, my heart aching with the reminder of a pain I thought I had buried. Each step seemed to awaken a deep, lingering ache, a reminder of the absence of my own child. I knew all too well the pain of not knowing where a child is, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Soon, a few night vendors, recognizing Owen, began to offer more accurate directions. One elderly man, reflecting my worried expression, pointed the way. "His home is this way. Turn at the next street," he instructed. I nodded, grateful for the guidance. "We're almost there, Owen," I said, trying to keep the reassurance in my voice. The journey to find Owen's home felt symbolic, a reflection of my own search for answers, and the end of a painful chapter in my life. "I know how hard it is to be away from your parents," I told him softly. "But you're safe now." Owen gripped my hand tightly, clearly comforted by my presence. As we approached a modest house, he finally broke into a smile. "This is my home," he said, and a wave of relief washed over his face. I knocked on the door, my heart racing. When it opened, I took a step back, my heart nearly stopping. For a brief moment, it felt as though the world had frozen. The face staring back at me was unmistakable, despite the years of separation and despair. It was a face I recognized anywhere. It was my son, the one who had been kidnapped 20 years ago. The moment felt like a collision of past and present, pulling me to the edge of my emotions. I knew I had to face it all head-on, no matter how overwhelming it felt. For a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. And then, Owen said, "Daddy." His small voice trembled with excitement, and he hugged his dad tightly. David, equally excited, bent down to embrace his son, holding him close with a tenderness that spoke volumes. "Oh, Owen, you gave me the greatest scare of my life," David said, holding his son tightly. "Where have you been? What happened?" Owen, with his head hung in embarrassment, explained, "I saw a dog in the street and started chasing it. Then I got lost and couldn't find my way home." David sighed deeply. "Owen, you know better than to run off like that. Something really bad could have happened," he said, his voice stern but filled with concern. "I know, Daddy. I'm sorry. I just forgot. I got scared when I realized I was lost," Owen admitted, tears welling in his eyes. "But then Margaret found me. She was so kind, Daddy. She helped me find my way home." David took a step forward, observing me hesitating at the threshold. "Good evening. My name is David. I can't express enough how grateful I am that you brought Owen home. You can't imagine how relieved I am to see him safe again." I, clearly overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment, forced a smile. "He's a very brave child. He was lost but wanted to find his way home." I just helped him, I said, downplaying my heroic actions. Even so, what you did is far more wonderful than what most people would have done. I truly appreciate it, David insisted, taking a hesitant step toward me. Please, come inside. Let us offer you a small token of our gratitude. I shook my head, making a gesture of refusal. No, really. I was just in the right place at the right time. I'm just glad he's safe. That's all that matters, I replied. There was an uncomfortable silence between David and I, a moment filled with unspoken questions and words left unsaid. Noticing my resolve, David said, I understand. If you change your mind, please feel free to come by any time. And once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I nodded. Take good care of him, I said softly as I turned to leave. He's a child, worthy of the world. Of course, David replied. Little did we know that night would mark the beginning of an unexpected journey for us. I walked away, each step away from the house carrying the weight of a decision that could forever change my life.
David stood by the door, watching her walk away. An indescribable feeling of a lost connection lingered in the air. After Margaret had left, Owen and David had shared a long embrace. Then the boy went to take a bath, and David started preparing dinner. David sat in the living room, his mind racing over the image of Margaret standing at the door, refusing to come in. He felt as if he knew her, but how? Margaret, he muttered to himself. He replayed every moment of that brief interaction, trying to unravel the mystery of Margaret. There's something there, something I can't understand, he continued, trying to connect the dots in his mind. Dots that seemed just out of reach. He stood up and began pacing the room. She knew exactly what to do, how to talk to Owen, as if she understood perfectly what it meant to lose someone. Her words resonated with a truth deeper than he had expected, echoing with a depth he hadn't known existed. David stopped in front of the window, staring out at the dark street. The image of Margaret walking away shone brightly in his mind. Who are you, Margaret? Why do I feel like you took a piece of me with you? Confusion mixed with overwhelming curiosity in David's mind. Did Owen feel that too, he wondered, recalling how easily his son had trusted Margaret and the way he had talked about her.
I sat on the bus, heading home, staring out the window, but not really seeing the night scenery passing by. Tears streamed down my face. David was Christopher, my Christopher. Years ago, in a crowded park, he was ripped from my arms in a moment of carelessness. It became the greatest pain of my life. The moment our eyes met, I knew him. It was a certainty as deep as the pain of the loss itself. I should have said something. Did he even recognize me? I muttered to myself. How could he? He was only 3 when he was kidnapped. Each bus stop was a reminder that I was moving further away from him. Should I have told him I was his mother? But what if he didn't believe me? The decision to walk away without revealing myself weighed heavily on me, like a stone in a sea of doubts. He is my son. My heart tells me so, I whispered. A mother's recognition transcends logic or reason. No mother can mistake her own child. I thought about Owen. The little lost angel who bridged the gap to the sweetest and most bitter reunion of my life. He unknowingly brought me back to my son. In my heart, the memories of that traumatic day still lingered. I saw myself once again in that square. 3-year-old Christopher was playing joyfully, filling my heart with love and happiness. It was a sunny afternoon, and I approached the ice cream vendor. As I was choosing a flavor, a sleek black car pulled up, darkening its windows near us. An elegantly dressed woman got out of the car and, with astonishing speed, approached my son. She grabbed him and ran swiftly toward the car. I screamed and ran after them, but it was too late. The car accelerated with a remarkable speed, disappearing between the streets before I could even reach it. My screams, filled with the anguish of a mother losing her son, echoed through the square, drawing the attention of everyone around. I fell to my knees. The ice cream was forgotten by my side. Tears soaked my face. Christopher was screaming. My heart shattered into pieces with every second that passed, unable to hold my son in my arms. My husband, Eric, and I rushed to the police station just hours after the kidnapping, hearts pounding with every step. When we got there, we approached the counter, desperate for help. A police officer met us with a look that was a mix of professional concern and a kind of indifferent bureaucracy. I started speaking, my voice shaking. "Please, you have to help us. Our son was taken from the square today." A woman grabbed him and sped off in a black car. The officer glanced at some papers on his desk, then looked back at us. He said, "Ma'am, we get a lot of missing child reports. Your son is probably nearby and will turn up soon. Have you searched the area? He might have just wandered off, chasing something or someone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "No, you don't understand," I insisted, feeling a surge of panic rising within me. "I saw the woman take him. She grabbed him and got into a car. This isn't just a case of a child wandering off. My son was kidnapped." Eric, trying to stay calm, added, "Please, we need to start a search right now. Every minute counts. We can provide a description of the woman and the car. There must have been witnesses in the square who saw something." The officer sighed, scribbling something in his notepad, then replied, "I'll log your case, but I have to tell you, our team is handling many cases right now. We'll do what we can, but you need to have realistic expectations. This city is big, and unfortunately, we can't find everyone." A chill ran through me as he said that. "That's unacceptable," I said, feeling a cold dread settle in my stomach. "My son is out there, possibly in danger, and you're telling me to have realistic expectations?" We left the police station with nothing but vague promises of an investigation. It was clear they weren't going to act with the urgency we needed. Their indifference added to the helplessness we were already feeling. For a whole year after Christopher was taken, Eric and I fought to find our son. We distributed flyers, spoke to the media, and even hired a private detective. But our efforts were marked by unimaginable tragedy. Eric died in a car accident. A cruel twist of fate left me alone in the fight to find Christopher. Losing Eric shattered what was left of my world, already broken by our son's kidnapping. Grief and pain seemed insurmountable, but amidst the darkness, my determination to find Christopher became my only focus. It was the only reason I kept going. It's been 22 years since that fateful day. 22 years of hope, pain, and relentless searching. Guilt has continued to eat away at me all these years. Why did you leave him alone? How could you let yourself get distracted? I've asked myself those questions over and over again. The day he was taken left a wound in my life, a permanent scar of my failure to protect him. I've spent countless nights lying awake, replaying that moment in my mind. Every detail feels like torture, each memory a reminder of how I failed him. "I should have been there with you, my son," I whisper to myself, my voice barely audible. "I should have protected you." But even in the depths of my despair, I held on to hope. "My son is out there somewhere," I would tell myself over and over again, as if saying it enough times could make it true. Even now, marked by the passage of time, I still believe it. When I got off the bus that day, I felt more lost than I ever had in my entire life. The loneliness of my house resonated with the emptiness in my heart, a void that I now knew could never be filled. What am I supposed to do now? I wondered, the question hanging in the still air around me. The certainty I once had that David was my Christopher, that hope had reignited a fire within me, but it was now a flame flickering in a whirlwind of uncertainty and fear. The next day, as I got ready for work, I couldn't get Christopher's image out of my mind. I kept thinking, would it be so bad if I just passed by his street one more time? What if he thought it was strange? What if something went wrong? My mind was a mess of what-ifs and maybes. By the end of the day, as I was closing up the bakery, I had made up my mind. Just this once, I'll pass by his house tonight, I decided, almost trying to convince myself. Just to see him. I knew there were risks, but the need to see my son, even from a distance, outweighed my fear of rejection or pain. That evening, I walked the familiar streets, my heart pounding in my chest as I approached his house. I stopped at a point where I could see it clearly but remained hidden in the shadows. The living room light was on, and for a brief moment, I saw him through the window. My heart swelled with warmth, but it also shattered into a million pieces. "There you are, my sweet Christopher," I whispered, tears streaming freely down my cheeks. I couldn't hold him, couldn't call him my son, but just seeing him, even from afar, was enough in that moment. My quiet observation was suddenly interrupted. "Owen!" I heard someone shout. Before I could even react, I felt a small pair of arms wrapped tightly around me. Surprised and overwhelmed, I crouched down to return the hug, feeling a confusing mix of joy and shock at this unexpected encounter. A woman approached us then, offering her hand in greeting. "You must be Margaret," she said warmly. "I'm Kate, Owen's mother. David has told us everything about how you helped our son. We can't thank you enough." I smiled shyly, shaking Kate's hand. "I just did what was right," I replied softly. "I'm glad I was there at the right time." When I reunited with Owen and met Kate, I felt an unexpected closeness to my son. Every word exchanged between us seemed to weave an unforeseen connection. Kate told me how Owen couldn't stop talking about me. She had a warmth in her eyes as she spoke, an affection that caught me off guard. She went on to say, "You've become a true hero to him, and to us as well." Hearing those words, I felt a warmth spreading in my chest, like a soft blanket wrapped around my heart. It was the sincerity in Kate's voice that touched me so deeply. But Owen, like any child tired of adult conversation, tugged at my shirt sleeve, eyes sparkling with anticipation. He asked if I wanted to see a drawing he'd made at school that day. There was something so innocent and pure in his eagerness to share with me, and I couldn't help but smile. He ran off, returning moments later with a colorful picture. He had drawn himself, me, and a big red heart, so bright and slightly out of proportion. It was such a sweet gesture that it caught in my throat, and for a moment, I felt a lump rising, threatening to spill over as tears. "That's beautiful, Owen. Thank you so much," I managed to say, my voice trembling with the effort to keep my emotions in check. His small act had such a profound impact on me. It was a moment that would stay with me forever. Kate watched me with a thoughtful expression, as if she was trying to gauge the depth of the connection that had quickly formed between me and her family. I could feel her assessing how naturally Owen and I seemed to understand each other, as if we had known each other far longer. Without hesitation, Kate took a step closer and asked if I would stay for dinner, mentioning how David had prepared a wonderful meal. For a brief second, I hesitated. The idea of sharing a meal in my son's home, being close to him in such an intimate setting, was both terrifying and irresistibly compelling. But I found myself nodding, saying, "Yes, I'd love to. Thank you." Inside, my emotions were swirling like a storm, a mixture of fear, hope, and something else I couldn't quite name. As we stepped inside, the warm aroma of the house filled the air, a comforting scent that reminded me of home and family. When David emerged from the kitchen and saw me, he smiled warmly, his eyes lighting up with genuine welcome. "I'm glad you could make it, Margaret," he said, extending his hand in greeting. For a moment, our eyes met, and my heart started to race. I was swept up in a wave of emotion, and for a fleeting second, I almost called him Christopher, the name echoing in my mind like a distant bell. But I caught myself just in time, holding back the name that was still so tender in my heart. "Thank you for inviting me, David," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. At first, I felt out of place. The oddness of the situation and being so close to David made me nervous. But as the night went on, the natural flow of conversation and the kindness everyone at the table showed me helped me relax. Dinner passed with stories and laughter, mostly about Owen's mischievous antics. Kate shared that Owen had already had adventures she could hardly believe. She said he was just one of those kids who couldn't sit still. She laughed as she talked about how he decided he wanted to be an explorer the other day. He organized an expedition in the backyard, spending the entire day outside with a barely working pair of binoculars and a paper hat. David chimed in, clearly proud of his son. He mentioned that Owen was incredibly creative too. One night, he built a time machine out of cardboard boxes, saying he wanted to travel to the future to see if cars could fly. I couldn't help but smile at these stories. Hearing them talk about Owen, I realized how wonderful it must be to have a son like him, full of energy and imagination. His parents clearly nurtured these qualities, showing they were good people. I paused, my eyes filled with admiration for the little boy. Owen, who had been fiddling with his spoon, stopped to listen, his eyes lighting up at the praise. "Thank you, Margaret," he said, his bright smile lighting up the room. For a moment, I imagined myself as part of this family, not just sharing a meal, but sharing life with them. But dinner took an unexpected turn when David asked a seemingly harmless question. "Margaret, do you have any children? You seem to have a natural talent with kids," he said, clearly meaning it as a compliment. Despite his good intentions, the question hit me like a punch to the gut. It pulled me from a comfortable moment and threw me back into past traumas. I hesitated, my hands trembling slightly in my lap. I began, but my voice faltered. Kate, noticing my discomfort, quickly intervened to ease the tension. She made a comment about the weather outside, shifting attention away from the previous conversation. Her intervention was subtle yet filled with deep empathy. She recognized there were emotional areas I wasn't ready to explore. The table soon filled with lighter conversation topics, and dinner continued with a renewed energy, focusing on shared stories and future plans. But for me, David's question reignited the fire of reflection about my own life, the choices I had made, and the circumstances that led me here. As the evening drew to a close and I prepared to leave the house that had offered me so much warmth and also mirrored my wounds, I carried with me a mix of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you for this wonderful evening," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "It was truly a special time for me," I said, my voice soft with gratitude as I looked up at David. He smiled warmly at me, his sincerity shining through every word as he walked me to the door. "We're the ones who should be thanking you," he replied. "We're so glad to have spent this evening with you, and I hope we can do it again soon." His words were kind, and I could feel the genuine warmth in each one. Just then, Kate joined us, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder, a gesture of friendship and solidarity. "Margaret," she said, "you are always welcome here. Owen loved spending time with you, and so did we." There was a sparkle in her eyes, reflecting her gentle heart. Not wanting to be left out, Owen ran over to me, wrapping his little arms tightly around my waist. "Goodbye, Margaret. Don't forget to come back soon," he said, his voice filled with the innocent hope of another visit. I knelt down and hugged him back, feeling his small frame pressed against mine. "I won't forget, Owen," I assured him. "Thank you for showing me your drawings, and thank you all for making me feel so special tonight." As I headed back to my apartment, I felt a lightness in my heart that I hadn't felt in years. The door to my small place, which once echoed with the loneliness of an empty space, now seemed to welcome me home with a new sense of possibility. "Something changed in me tonight," I thought to myself as I slipped off my shoes and quietly walked into the living room. "I was there, with them, with my family," I whispered. For years, I felt like I was drifting through the world all alone. But tonight, even if it was just for a few hours, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My son, oh, how he has grown. And how gentle and warm he is. And Owen, he's like a beam of light, full of life and love. I have a grandson, I murmured to myself, the word a grandson sounding so new and unbelievably sweet. As I prepared for bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known since before the day my son was taken from me. I'm near my son, my grandson, and my daughter-in-law. That is a gift beyond measure. With those thoughts, I drifted off to sleep with a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in a long time. The next day, as I was walking to the bakery where I work, I barely noticed the car slowing down beside me until I heard Kate's familiar voice calling out to me. "Margaret, would you like a ride?" I gratefully accepted her offer. "That would be wonderful." "Thank you," I replied as I climbed into the car. During the ride, our conversation flowed naturally. As days passed, that chance ride became a morning ritual, and the conversations that began during those short drives blossomed into shared lunches and meetings after work. During one of those lunches, Kate opened up about something deeply personal. "I had to go through many difficulties before finally being able to give birth to Owen," she said. "There were years filled with hope and disappointment. Owen is a miracle in so many ways for us. Before him, there were 2 failed pregnancies. Losing a child is a pain that words can hardly express." She spoke with a heavy heart, feeling the weight of those memories pressing down on her. "I understand the pain of losing a child," I whispered. "It's a pain that never truly goes away, just changes shape." Kate caught the slight slip in my words and asked softly, "Did you lose a child too?" I hesitated, the weight of my past heavy on my shoulders. I chose my words carefully, my voice trembling. "It wasn't in the way you might think," I started. "My son was taken from me when he was just 3. He was kidnapped." The initial shock crossed Kate's face, quickly replaced by deep empathy. "Margaret, I can't even begin to imagine the unimaginable pain you've been through and continue to endure," Kate said. "My heart goes out to you. I want you to know that I'm here for you, truly." "Thank you, Kate," I responded, feeling the warmth of her support. "Your friendship means more to me than I can express," I added. In the following weeks, our friendship grew stronger through our morning drives together. But one day, on the way to the bakery, I suddenly felt unwell. Kate had to rush me to the hospital, where I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, a condition previously unknown to me. After the initial shock, Kate took me home, making sure I was safe and comfortable. As I prepared tea in the kitchen, Kate was in the living room. Looking around, her eyes landed on a framed photograph. It was a portrait she knew well. The child in the photo was unmistakable. "Wait, this child is David. Why is there a picture of David in your house?" she asked, holding up the frame. Turning towards me as I entered the room, Kate's discovery made me feel like the world was standing still. "It's not the David you know," I tried to explain, but my voice faltered. "Why deny it, Margaret? The resemblance is undeniable." "It doesn't make sense otherwise," Kate said, her tone growing more accusatory as she connected the dots. "Did you plan this from the start? Did you come close to us with a secondary intention?" I could hear the accusation in Kate's voice as she challenged me. "No, Kate, you don't understand. I never had any malice," I began, my voice trembling under the weight of her accusation. "Then how can I trust you, Margaret? You just appeared out of nowhere, inserted yourself into our lives, and now this discovery. What else are you hiding?" The pressure of Kate's harsh words, coupled with the fear of losing the bond one was beginning to form with my son, broke down my defenses. Tears began to flow freely down my face. "I'm so sorry, Kate. I just wanted to be near him. Near my son. I didn't know what else to do," I confessed through my sobs. Kate's heart, though still enveloped in shock and confusion, couldn't ignore the genuine pain I was experiencing. After all, she was a mother too. Still grappling with the avalanche of revelations, she asked, "Why didn't you tell us from the beginning? Why keep it a secret?" Wiping my tears, I said, "I was scared, Kate. Scared of how you would react. Scared of losing the small connection I had just found with my son. I didn't know what to do. Please, I'm begging you. Don't tell David anything. Not yet. I just want to be close to him, even from a distance." Kate slowly nodded. "I won't say anything for now," she agreed. "But you need to understand. I need to know what really happened." At that point, Kate revealed that she knew David was adopted. "He told me that his mother had abandoned him," Kate explained. Hearing this, I vehemently denied the version of events. I would never abandon my child. He was taken from me. Kidnapped. I've been searching for him all these years, I said. The conversation left Kate with more questions than answers. "I'll investigate, Margaret. Not just for David, but for all of us," she resolved.
Attorney Edward Brown took a deep breath before beginning the story. Dennis and Frances, David's adoptive parents, had passed away a few years ago. Kate had always held them in the highest regard. Though they never hid the fact that David was adopted, they always emphasized how much he was wanted and loved. David grew up knowing that he was chosen and that his parents had walked a long road for him, which made him feel even more special and cherished. Dennis, a successful businessman, was known in the community not just for his business acumen but also for his big heart and generosity. Meanwhile, Frances was wholly devoted to home and family. Her life was marked by her struggle with infertility. When David came into their lives, she was 40 and considered it the fulfillment of her life's dream. Her relationship with David was filled with meticulous care and affection that made a significant difference in their daily lives. According to Frances, David's arrival was a miracle brought by a stranger. She often recounted, "A woman came up to me on the street, holding David. She knew how much I wanted a child and said she had no conditions to care for him." Kate was left in a state of confusion. Frances always said David was a gift from a stranger. She spoke with such conviction. Now, Margaret says David was kidnapped. Who is telling the truth? Determined to uncover the truth behind David's adoption, Kate had gone to see Edward. He was a man who had been a close friend of David's adoptive parents for many years. Upon entering the office, she met the elderly lawyer. "Kate, it's as if God sent you," he said. With a frail but urgent voice, the lawyer continued. "There is something I must tell you before it's too late. It's a secret I've been carrying for years, one I can't take to the grave." The lawyer went on. David's adoptive mother had gone through the devastating experience of losing a child. One day, she suddenly came home with a 3-year-old child in her arms. That child was David. A woman handed him to her, saying she knew how much she wanted a child and had no means to care for him. Without question, she accepted him due to her vulnerable situation and her longing for a child. I handled all the bureaucratic procedures, and the couple legally adopted David. But about 5 years later, she revealed the truth to me. She had kidnapped the child. By then, David had already come to see them as his parents, and they loved him as their own. Facing this reality in the existing affection, we decided to keep the secret. I am truly sorry, Kate. I should have done something back then, but seeing their love for David, I couldn't bear to break up their family. But now, with my remaining time, I cannot endure the thought of taking this truth to my grave, the lawyer confessed. Kate listened in shock, stunned by the revelation. The story revealed the pain and injustice inflicted upon Margaret. It was the tale of a mother who cruelly lost her son and had fought for years to find him. Still processing the gravity of the confession, Kate said, "Justice will be served. I know David's birth mother. Margaret is a wonderful woman who has suffered greatly from losing her son. I will resolve this situation," she said with determination. "Don't worry, Mr. Brown. I will do everything necessary for David to learn the truth about his roots. It will be a delicate process, but I promise to handle it with the utmost care and respect for everyone's emotions." Hearing Kate's words, the lawyer felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. "Thank you, Kate. Knowing that this situation will be resolved by someone with such consideration and compassion is everything I could hope for." Returning home, Kate's heart was heavy with the weight of the task ahead, but it was also illuminated by a flame of hope. Kate knew she needed to approach this issue with David carefully and sensitively. As the day drew to a close, she sat next to him and chose her words with care. "David, have you ever thought about meeting your birth mother? What would that be like?" she asked, closely observing his reaction. David looked thoughtful. "Yes, I have thought about it," he admitted. "Sometimes, especially now that Owen is growing up, I wish my mother were here. It would be nice for him to have a grandmother too. But I always thought it would be difficult. All I know is that she abandoned me. How do you start looking for someone who didn't want you?" Kate felt a pang in her heart at David's words. What if things aren't as you've always thought? There might be more to your story than you know. Encouraged by Kate's words, David began to open up more about his feelings. You know, there's always been a part of me that felt like something was missing. A piece of my story, David confessed. The thought that my birth mother might have been forced to give me up could change everything. Kate carefully asked, David, how would you feel about trying to find your mother? Is that something you'd want to do? David responded, I want to know. I need to know. But where do I even begin? Kate had a plan. Let's start with a small step. There are people who can help uncover your story. We need to take you to a special place, she said to David, trying to hide her anxiety behind a smile. He agreed without any thought of the destination or the impact of that encounter. Kate drove to Margaret's house. When David recognized the place, he felt an inexplicable wave of emotions.
When they walked in, I could feel the tension in the air. I tried to keep my nerves under control. I said I would get them some water. Kate seemed to understand the heavy atmosphere and was making an effort to lighten it. As she searched for a way to ease the revelation, she took out a photo of David from his childhood. The same photo that had caused so much confusion and pain just days before. She handed it to David. Look at this, she said gently. David took the photo and, seeing himself in it, seemed to be overwhelmed. Wait. This is me, and this is Margaret. How is this possible? He looked around, and familiar details began to resurface in his memory. Forgotten fragments of the past slowly pieced together. Tears of realization began to flow down his face. I remember being there, he said. When I returned to the room with the water, my eyes met David's. In that moment, it felt as if the walls of time and separation were collapsing. Are you really my mother? David asked. Yes, David. It has always been so, from the moment you were born, from the moment you were taken from me. Not a day went by that I didn't think of you or search for you, she confessed. But I was told I was abandoned, David murmured. Why did this happen? I would never have abandoned you. You were kidnapped. Taken from me. I did everything I could to find you. But at some point, I was advised that moving on was the better path, I explained. Everything in my life, all the stories I was told, were lies? His voice was filled with shock and disbelief. Yes, David. I am truly sorry that you had to learn it this way. You were taken from me when you were just 3 years old, and I have spent all these years searching for you. Despite all hope, I wished for us to reunite. She kidnapped you. It wasn't a traditional or legal adoption as you were told. And further, Edward Brown had been hiding everything for years. He helped maintain the illusion of normalcy around your adoption, Kate explained. David felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. So, they knew. They knew I was taken from my real mother, and they still chose to raise me as if nothing had happened. The sense of betrayal was clear. Yes, David. Edward said that Frances was desperate for a child after losing her own. As time passed, the secret became too heavy a burden for her, and she confessed the truth. But by then, you had already seen them as family, and they saw you the same way. That's why they chose to keep the secret, Kate said. As I tried to process the magnitude of what David had just learned, there was a long moment of silence. I need time to process this, he finally said, his voice choked with emotion. After the shocking revelation, David stood up and left without another word.
In the days that followed, David struggled to find meaning in his fragmented story and the intense emotions that left him feeling isolated and drained. Entering the room, he felt the world he had known crumble around him, as if he were drifting in a sea of uncertainty. For 7 long days, he wrestled with his thoughts and emotions, navigating between anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. Yet, deep within, there was a spark of curiosity and a pressing need to understand and reconnect with the life that had been taken from him. The necessity ultimately led him to Margaret's door. When David finally decided to visit her, his heart was heavy, but filled with resolve. As David knocked on Margaret's door, his heart raced, each beat tangled with anxiety and hope.
When I opened the door and our eyes met, David began, I had to come back. I have so many questions. My eyes were filled with tears, yet they were also brimming with love as I opened the door wider. I'm here, David. I'm here to answer all your questions. I'll help fill in the gaps. Let's discover everything together, she said. Hearing my words, he felt a wave of anger and sorrow for what we had lost, but also a growing connection with the woman before him. You never gave up, even after all these years, he asked. How could I give up? I replied, reaching out to hold David's hand. You are my son. A part of my heart knew we would be reunited someday. I just had to hold on to hope, I said. David looked at me and said, I don't know how to process all this. My whole life feels like a lie. How do I start understanding who I really am? I held David's hand with affection. Let's discover it together. I'll tell you everything about your story, your family, and the happy days we spent before you were taken from me. It won't be easy, but we'll take it one step at a time, I said. But what about the family who raised me? I loved them deeply. How do I reconcile those feelings now that I know it all started with such a violent act? He said. David was trying to understand how the woman he called mother, the woman he loved, could commit such a cruel act. How can I look back at the happiness of my childhood when I know it was built on such a massive lie, he wondered. The once symbolic figures of safety and love, David's parents, Francis and Dennis, now seemed to evoke a complex mixture of gratitude and betrayal within him. They loved me. But how can I justify that love when it began with the pain of others? He expressed, disappointment clear on his face. I sighed and said, they loved you too, David. That's undeniable. And their love doesn't have to be diminished by the truth. We can love even in the most complex situations. The love you felt for them, and that they felt for you, is real. And how have you lived with this pain for so long? He asked. I answered, it wasn't easy. There were days I thought I couldn't bear it. But the hope of finding you again, holding you, and showing you how much I love you kept me going. And now, you're here. That hope has become reality. I want to learn about all of this, about you, about us. It feels like I need to discover a new life, he said. Touched by his determination, I replied, there's so much time to reclaim, David. And many stories to share. You have a family here who loves you. Let's create new memories together. Thank you for never giving up on me, he said. David, more than anything, I want you to know that I have always loved you. From the moment I learned about you, from the first time I held you in my arms, and even after you were taken from me, that love never wavered. For all those years, my love for you kept me alive, giving me the strength to keep searching and never lose hope of finding you again. And now, here we are. As I spoke these words, I felt a wave of powerful emotions that swept away any lingering doubts or fears David might have harbored deep inside. David, I love you. That feeling will never change. No matter what the future holds, remember that. You are a part of me, and I am a part of you. Together, there is nothing we cannot overcome. David was deeply moved by my words, and with a heartfelt, I love you, Mom, he expressed his feelings. In that moment, we embraced, signaling the start of our journey together, a journey of healing, discovery, and rediscovered love. We knew there would be challenges ahead, but with each other, we had hope for the future. As time went on, David and I began to adapt to our new dynamic, discovering and strengthening our bond. But there was still one issue to resolve, the truth David needed to share with his son, Owen. After careful thought and many discussions, David and I decided it was time to tell Owen about his real grandmother. We chose a calm moment and settled down in the warm atmosphere of our home. Owen, have you ever thought about what it would be like to have a grandmother? I asked. Owen's eyes lit up with curiosity and excitement. Of course. It would be amazing. Grandmothers always have the best stories and bake the best cookies, he replied without hesitation. His pure joy and enthusiasm warmed our hearts. David looked at me and said, what if you had a grandmother who wanted to meet you? And what if that grandmother was Margaret? Owen's face sparkled with surprise. Really? Margaret is going to be my grandmother? That's awesome, he exclaimed, his smile beaming. Without hesitation, Owen ran to me, accepting me not just as a family friend but as his grandmother. This is incredible. I've always wanted a grandmother, and you're so wonderful. Grandma Margaret, I love you. Owen said excitedly. Seeing Owen's immediate and enthusiastic acceptance brought tears to my eyes. I was deeply touched by being welcomed into my grandchild's life. I love you too, sweet child, I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. Tears of happiness streamed down my face as I felt the warmth of my grandchild's embrace. It was a moment I had dreamed of for so long, and now it was a reality I could scarcely believe. David watched the scene with a heart full of gratitude and relief. He felt that seeing his mother and son together was the greatest blessing. We're starting a new story together, Owen said, releasing the embrace. He looked at David and me with shining eyes. That means we're beginning something new. We can have more adventures together, like a real family. Absolutely, Owen. Many adventures await us, I replied. And plenty of cookies, Owen added, his happy laughter filling the room. I can't wait. Owen cheered, bouncing with excitement. As David, Owen, and I shared this joyful and bonding moment, Kate approached, drawn by our laughter and excitement. What's going on here? Kate asked. I didn't hesitate for a moment as I watched Owen run towards Kate, his arms wide open. His face was alight with pure happiness. Mom, you won't believe it. I have a grandmother now. He pointed to me and formally introduced her to Kate. This is Grandma Margaret. It was as if he were revealing the most wonderful secret. Kate looked at me and said, Grandma Margaret, that's wonderful. Welcome to the family. I, overwhelmed with emotion, replied, Thank you, Kate. I'm so grateful for this moment. As I observed my family coming together, I felt a wave of gratitude and peace. Everyone feels the same way, I said, joining the group. It looks like our family has grown a bit. That day, Owen, Kate, David, and I stood on the threshold of a beautiful journey. A journey of healing, rediscovery, and above all, unconditional love. We would face the future united. With courage and hope, knowing that together, nothing was impossible. Bound by rediscovered love and new relationships, we looked forward to the future with hope and joy. Ready to face whatever life had in store, together.
If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share wonderful stories every day. Don't miss the next amazing tale that's coming your way. We truly appreciate your support. Until next time.